We've had some questions about what the point of being genetically tested is, especially when you're an adult. If you have albinism, if you're entitled to have a genetic test to find out the cause of your albinism, but also if you're a parent who's got a little child, why would you get them tested to find out what the cause of their albinism is if it's really obvious?
Yeah, it's a fair question. So I think there's two parts to that. So if you have a child who's newly, people are wondering whether they have albinism, there's some good reasons to have genetic testing on the whole. Often when we do our tests and we think it probably is a form of albinism, that's all we can say, right? Until we have genetics, we don't know what form. In terms of form, there are some rare types of albinism which are associated with other bits and bobs around the body that it's worth knowing about, particularly in a baby. But also it can be useful in terms of questions about future generations. What happens with my sisters have children, should they all be tested? All that kind of stuff. So it can be really useful just for information. And the third part is that there are treatments coming online for some forms of albinism. So there's clinical studies going on at the moment. We're doing some and elsewhere, and there's only going to be more of them. But for every single one, you would need to know your genetic diagnosis to get into those trials if you wanted to, but also keep an eye on them and see what's happening with treatments and developments, because they're very likely to always be specific to a particular gene or type of albinism. For an adult who's had it all their life, it's more difficult. In terms of entitlement, the entitlement thing is a bit difficult. In the UK here, it's done a little bit kind of based on geographical luck, if you like. So if your clinical genetics department, some of them will say, oh, maybe it's good, maybe it's bad. But more important than that sort of slight variation is the fact that you might be an adult who wants to have children and wants to think about that. That's a specific question, and you could find out what type you have, hopefully, and have a more informed discussion about that. You might be an adult who has some other medical conditions, and you're actually trying to work out whether it is related in some way, whether you're one of those people with much rarer form of syndromic albinism. If you are 70, you're not planning on having any children, you have no direct descendants, there's no one else in your family with it, and you're not interested in finding out more for your family, then that's a good question. Why would you do it? So it all depends on your scenario as an adult, but for children, it's rare to not want to do it, to be honest.
So as an adult, if you choose to do it, I think people worry that it might affect like health insurance or something like that. Is there any worry that having a genetic diagnosis could affect stuff like that, or is it actually just a really positive thing in terms of also for future generations and you guys who are doing research into it?
Yeah, so that's a difficult one, because most of the genomics now is done via a great big system, right? And the data is stored in the NHS, and there's some people have access to it for various reasons. So that worry that people have about insurance companies being able to delve into their data and suddenly your car premium goes up, or your house insurance goes up, or whatever, that can't be completely excluded, I would argue. To be honest, I'm not an expert with the data protection for it all, but I couldn't say 100% that no one will ever have access to that data that you don't want them to. I don't know the answer to that. I mean, obviously there's GDPR, so that data is yours, but things happen, and there's central data usage. If you have testing via what's called whole genome sequencing these days, there's a whole load of consent form processes for it, and a lot of that is such that some companies can get anonymous data to try and work on drug development, that kind of stuff. So that I can't completely exclude that concern and tell people there is no way that any of your data will ever go anywhere. But I think the risk in reality to us about that tracking back to you being identified and your house insurance going up or your medical insurance going up, I think is not a big worry at the moment, to be completely honest.
So I had my genetics done a couple of years ago, and I was diagnosed with albinism, which was a complete shock to me from those results. Didn't realise I had it until I got them. I only really recently, in the last week, bothered to actually read the report that was sent through with it. Well, I sent it to you and you read it because it means nothing to me. But I was really disappointed, Jay, because I thought that I would have some kind of descent to some European tribe of people with albinism that hadn't yet been discovered. And I wasn't, and it disappointed me greatly.
So I can't exclude that that's the case. That might be true, but it's so undiscovered we don't know about it. How's that? But no, so the genetics that you have, it is a good example of when we do the test and we get a result which is kind of relatively definitive. So when we do genetic testing, importantly, a lot of results that we get are new. They're literally a spelling change that no one's ever seen before, because we absolutely don't know anything. Sometimes they come back with no result at all, because again, we don't know everything. But sometimes they come back with spelling changes or mutations that we've seen lots of times before. Someone's done some studies on that mutation. They've even done it in a lab and shown that when you add that mutation, something doesn't go as dark with pigment, etc., etc. So there's levels of evidence for all the spelling mistakes that you can get from genetic reports. And yours were really high, good kind of level of evidence for both of them. And what that means is the lab because our labs are very conservative in the UK particularly, and they are confident that that is the cause of your albinism that you already knew you have. So I get your point about, what's the point in knowing that? Again, that's one for you to answer potentially. But I would argue it's things such as future generations, just checking that you don't have one of the forms that causes other stuff, just because that would always be in the back of your mind, even if we're saying it's rare and you've never had any of the features, that kind of thing. And on the unique thing, by the way, if we looked up your spelling changes that you have, there would be very few people in the world that have those too. It's just individually they have been seen before. It's just that combination is probably very unique to you. And there will be others.
I wanted to be the first.
Be the only one.
I just wanted to be me on my own, and it wasn't.
Okay, here's a thing that will make you feel happy. So if we looked at all of your genetics, you would be unique to every single person in the world. But more than that, if we looked at all of it, all right, let me finish. You'd be unique to everyone who's ever lived on planet Earth, so you're still unique. Is that good enough? No. No, it won't be good enough. Oh, that's right, sorry.
But I got it done because I've already had my kids. My daughter, who was diagnosed with albinism, she's had genetic testing, so I kind of know, she knows where she's at, and I know where I'm at. I did it more because I just feel like it's important for future generations as well, so that you guys can kind of understand it a bit more, because if people don't do it, then you can't research it, can you? So I think it's just and also I think it's quite cool. That's like most people don't get that done, do they? So it's really cool that I know stuff about my body that other people don't know about their bodies. So I think it's, in that way, it's kind of cool too.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think, if people are watching this thinking about should we get genetic testing, it's individual to your own scenarios. I think we've illustrated very different between child and adult, very different if you've got multiple family members who've already had it, etc., etc. So discuss it with your clinical team. But I would say broadly, in my practice, on the whole, almost every child would have genetic testing, because there's always a reasonable argument for it. Yeah. Can't believe you ruined my little story halfway through.
I know, but your story was because everyone's genetics are unique to them. I wanted mine to be even more unique. I wanted them to be like, you'd look at it and you go, oh my God, Kristina, this is like amazing. I'm going to have to write a paper about you because you are related to like a Greenland queen with albinism who descended from King John the Ninth or something. No. You message going, yeah, they're really classic, whatever, boring mutations. Well, that's not what I want.
There's potentially something interesting in there, isn't there? When kids are young and they're new to families with albinism, parents really worry that they don't want them to be different or unique or whatever. And then, there's also that conflict. Actually, everybody does want to be unique. And I have more patients, I think, wanting to be a medical marvel than are a medical marvel. I have that quite often. To be honest, it's almost like an off-the-cuff thing that people love to say, isn't it? Oh, yeah, no one's ever seen it before. I'm totally unique. I'm new. I'm different, and that's almost like a human need. It's really interesting.
Yeah,
but
it's cool.
In the context, but in the context of a condition that maybe we spend a bit of time saying, you're not super different. You're like everyone else. You just have a few extra things to say about. It's an interesting conflict, isn't it?
I think it comes with age though as well. Like when I was younger, I'd have been like, I don't even want to get my genetics tested because they're the same as everybody else's. But now I'm like, I'm all for it. I'm like, the weirder they are, the better. But they're not weird. So growing up and watching up.
Maybe.